In the autumn of 1995, high school junior Jessica Miles vanished from the dense forests surrounding Pine Creek, Oregon. One moment, she was an aspiring photographer chasing the perfect shot. The next, she was gone. Her disappearance left a scar on the small town, a wound that refused to heal. For 17 long years, the case grew colder than the mountain peaks where she was last seen. It became a ghost story, a cautionary tale whispered among locals. The official narrative was simple: a tragic accident, a young girl lost to the unforgiving wilderness. Her family was left with nothing but questions and a silence that screamed louder than any answer. The forest kept its secrets locked away, and hope dwindled into a dull, persistent ache. 17 years later, the dust of the past was about to be disturbed. In a quiet, lonely house filled with memories, Jessica's father would make a chilling discovery. While sifting through the relics of a life cut short, his eyes would fall upon a forgotten detail in an old high school yearbook. It was a small thing, a face in a crowd, a detail hidden in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. But for him, it was a key that would unlock a conspiracy of silence, expose a dark betrayal, and finally reveal the horrifying truth of what really happened to his daughter on that cold, fateful day. What he found would prove that Jessica hadn't just been lost to the woods. She had been erased. Jessica Miles, known to everyone as Jessie, was incandescent. At 17, she saw the world not as it was, but as it could be, framed perfectly through the lens of her Minolta X700 camera. It had been a gift from her father, Robert, for her 16th birthday, and from that moment on, it was a permanent extension of her arm. She wasn't just taking pictures, she was capturing moments, bottling the fleeting beauty of the world around her. Her ambition was as vast as the Oregon sky she loved to photograph. She dreamed of working for National Geographic, of traveling to the world's most remote corners and telling stories without words. Jessie was vibrant and determined, with a laugh that could fill any room and a quiet intensity when she was focused on her craft. She had her mother Sarah's gentle heart and her father Robert's stubborn resolve. The three of them were a tight-knit unit, their lives interwoven with shared dinners, inside jokes, and unconditional support for Jessie's dreams. Robert, a carpenter, had even built her a darkroom in the basement, a sanctuary of chemical trays and glowing red light where she would spend hours bringing her images to life. Her life was a tapestry of simple, profound joys. She worked part-time at the Pine Creek Diner, where she'd charm the regulars and save her tips for new lenses. Her best friend was Liam Carter, a boy she'd known since kindergarten. They were inseparable, sharing a bond forged in scraped knees, shared secrets, and a mutual understanding of what it was like to grow up in a town where everyone knew your name. Liam was the cautious one, the steady anchor to Jessie's adventurous spirit. He was her designated driver on late-night trips to capture the Milky Way, and her patient subject when she was practicing portraits. He was the one who listened to her elaborate plans to photograph snow leopards in the Himalayas, never once telling her it was impossible. To him, nothing was impossible for Jessie. She had a way of making you believe. Her bedroom walls weren't covered in posters of rock stars, but with her own black and white prints of sprawling landscapes, intricate frost patterns on a window pane, and candid portraits of her parents. Each photo was a testament to her unique perspective, her ability to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. That was her gift. She had so much to live for, a family that adored her, a future that shimmered with promise, and a passion that gave her life meaning and direction. The week she disappeared, she was meticulously preparing her portfolio for a prestigious statewide photography competition. The grand prize was a scholarship to a summer arts program, a stepping stone she believed would launch her career. She was on the cusp of everything. The life she had so carefully and joyfully built was rich, full, and poised for greatness. This was the life that was interrupted, the vibrant light that was extinguished, leaving behind an aching void and a mystery that would haunt her loved ones for years to come. The morning of October 27, 1995, dawned crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that felt like a gift in the Pacific Northwest. Jessie was electric with purpose. She had her sights set on Eagle's Peak, a notoriously challenging but rewarding trail known for its panoramic views of the Cascade Range. It was the perfect location to capture the final, prize-winning shot for her competition portfolio. The deadline was Monday. She had convinced a reluctant Liam to come with her, promising him it would be a quick trip. In and out before lunch, she'd said, her enthusiasm infectious. Her parents, Sarah and Robert, were used to her photographic expeditions. They reminded her to be careful, to wear layers, and to be home long before dark. She promised she would. She hugged them both, grabbed her camera bag, and flashed them a brilliant smile before hopping into her beat-up Toyota. That smile would be their last memory of her. As she and Liam drove up the winding, unpaved access road to the trailhead, the weather began to turn. The brilliant blue sky was slowly being consumed by a thick, ominous bank of fog rolling in from the west. It clung to the towering pines, swallowing the landscape in a damp, gray shroud. Liam grew nervous. "Jess, maybe we should turn back," he suggested, gesturing towards the ever-thickening mist. "This stuff can get you turned around in a second." Jessie, however, was undeterred. The fog to her wasn't a hazard. It was an opportunity. It would add atmosphere, mood, and a touch of mystery to her photos. "Don't worry," she insisted. "I know this trail like the back of my hand. This is perfect." A few hundred yards from the trailhead, they passed a dark green sedan parked awkwardly on the shoulder of the narrow road. It seemed out of place so deep in the woods on a weekday. Liam glanced at it, a flicker of unease crossing his face. But Jessie was already focused on the trail ahead, her mind consumed by f-stops and shutter speeds. They parked and got out. The air was cold and heavy with moisture. Jessie pulled on her favorite beanie, slung her camera around her neck, and checked the light meter. She was in her element. Liam, less so. He zipped his jacket up to his chin, his breath pluming in the frigid air. They started up the path, the silence of the forest broken only by the crunch of their boots on fallen leaves. The fog grew denser with every step, reducing visibility to less than 20 feet. It was disorienting, isolating. The familiar trail markers became harder to spot. It was a fatal mistake, a gamble against nature that Jessie was supremely confident she could win. She was pushing her luck, driven by ambition and an artist's desire for the perfect shot, unaware that the real danger wasn't the weather. The real danger was already in the woods with them, watching and waiting. The first pang of worry struck Robert Miles around 7 p.m. Jessie was a stickler for her word. When she said she'd be home before dark, she meant it. He and Sarah exchanged uneasy glances as the clock ticked past 8, then 9. The fog that had blanketed the mountains all day had now descended upon the town, pressing against their windows like a ghostly hand. Robert tried her pager. No response. Sarah called the diner, but her shift had ended hours ago. Panic began its cold climb up their spines. At 9:30, Sarah called the Carter residence. Liam's mother answered, her voice strained. Liam was home. He had been for hours. He was distraught. Robert and Sarah were in their car in minutes, speeding towards the winding mountain road that led to Eagle's Peak. The drive was a nightmare, their headlights barely piercing the suffocating fog. When they reached the trailhead, their worst fears began to solidify. Jessie's old Toyota was there, parked exactly where she'd left it, now coated in a fine layer of mist. It was eerily silent. Robert wrenched the driver's side door open. It was unlocked. His heart hammered against his ribs. He shone a flashlight inside. Her heavy winter jacket was neatly folded on the back seat. Her photography bag, the one that held all her lenses and film, sat on the passenger seat. But her camera, her beloved Minolta that she never went anywhere without, was gone. The scene was a quiet scream of wrongness. Jessie would never have left her car unlocked. She would never have left her expensive gear bag behind. And she certainly would never have ventured into the freezing fog without her jacket. It made no sense. This wasn't the scene of someone who got lost. It felt like something else entirely. Sarah began to cry, a low, guttural sound of pure terror. Robert, his face a grim mask, circled the car, his flashlight beam cutting frantically through the darkness. He called out her name, his voice swallowed by the dense, silent woods. "Jessie, Jessica!" The only reply was the drip of condensation from the pine trees. There were no tracks, no sign of a struggle, nothing. It was as if she had simply stepped out of her car and evaporated into the mist. At 10:12 p.m., a frantic, breathless call was logged by the Pine Creek 911 dispatcher. It was Robert Miles. His voice was cracking, a chaotic mix of panic and disbelief. "My daughter," he choked out. "Her car is here at Eagles Peak, but she's gone. She's just gone." The official search for Jessica Miles began at first light, but it was immediately hobbled by the very element that had excited her: the fog. It was a physical, oppressive force, a gray wall that grounded helicopters and reduced visibility on the ground to near zero. A small army of sheriff's deputies and local search and rescue volunteers assembled at the trailhead, their fluorescent vests a stark contrast to the muted landscape. They were led by Deputy Brody, a stoic, no-nonsense local lawman who had known the Miles family for years. The initial strategy was standard procedure: establish a perimeter and conduct grid searches radiating out from Jesse's car. K9 units were brought in, but the damp, cold air suppressed any scent, and the dogs grew frustrated, whining and circling uselessly. The searchers, shouting Jesse's name, found their voices absorbed by the thick, sound-dampening fog. It was like shouting into a pillow. The primary witness, Liam Carter, was interviewed multiple times. Visibly shaken, he told a consistent story. He said that on the trail, the fog became so thick they could barely see each other. He had called out to Jessie, who was a little ahead of him, but she didn't answer. He thought she was playing a joke. He waited, called again, and then started to panic. He tried to backtrack to where he last saw her, but became disoriented himself. Fearing he'd get hopelessly lost as darkness fell, he made the difficult decision to hike back down the trail alone to get help. His story was plausible, his distress genuine. Deputy Brody and his team operated on the most likely theory. Jessie had wandered off the trail, gotten lost in the fog, and was now hunkered down somewhere, waiting for rescue. But as the day wore on, the weather worsened. The fog thickened and morphed into a relentless, freezing rain. The temperature plummeted. The search became a grueling, dangerous slog through muddy, slippery terrain. Searchers battled hypothermia and exhaustion. On the second day, a tragic accident nearly compounded the disaster. A search helicopter, attempting a risky flight in a brief lull, was hit by a sudden, violent downdraft. The pilot managed to pull up just feet from the treetops, a terrifying close call that resulted in the immediate and permanent grounding of all air support. The search was now entirely on foot, in a vast, treacherous wilderness. Robert Miles was a man possessed. He refused to stay at the command post, instead joining the search parties, his face a raw portrait of anguish and desperation. He felt a growing frustration with the official effort. To him, it felt disorganized, hampered by the weather, and a sense of resignation from the authorities. He argued with Deputy Brody, insisting they search more rugged, less obvious areas. But Brody was firm, sticking to protocol. After 10 brutal days with no clues, no tracks, and no sign of Jessie, the search was officially scaled back, then suspended. Brody delivered the news to Robert and Sarah with grim sympathy. The official conclusion was that Jessie had most likely succumbed to the elements. Her body, he explained, could be anywhere in hundreds of square miles of dense forest. It was a tragic but not uncommon story in the mountains of Oregon. For Robert, it was an unacceptable failure. The forest hadn't taken his daughter. Something else had, and the botched search had just given it a 2-week head start. The years that followed the failed search were a slow, grinding torture for the Miles family. The case of Jessica Miles went cold, filed away in a cabinet at the sheriff's office, a stark testament to nature's indifference and law enforcement's limitations. For the town of Pine Creek, the story slowly morphed from a raw tragedy into a piece of grim local folklore. Teenagers would dare each other to drive up to the Eagles Peak trailhead at night, hoping to catch a glimpse of Jessie's ghost. The spot where she vanished was unofficially renamed Jesse's Peak, a landmark of sorrow. Her name became a cautionary tale for parents to tell their children about the dangers of the woods. But for Robert and Sarah Miles, there was no folklore, only a gaping wound that never closed. Their home, once filled with Jessie's laughter and the smell of darkroom chemicals, became a silent, suffocating shrine. Jessie's bedroom remained untouched, a perfect time capsule from 1995. Her photographs still adorned the walls, her clothes hung in the closet, her bed was perfectly made. It was a museum of a life interrupted. Sarah retreated into a world of quiet grief, a fragile ghost in her own home. The light in her eyes, which had once mirrored Jesse's, had gone out. Robert's grief took a different, more obsessive form. He couldn't accept the official story. The neatness of the scene at her car, the unlocked door, the folded jacket, it gnawed at him. Every weekend he would return to the mountains. With a backpack, a map, and a stubborn refusal to give up, he conducted his own one-man search. He scoured the ravines, cliffs, and dense undergrowth that the official search had deemed too difficult or unlikely. He was searching for his daughter, but he was also searching for an answer, for something that made sense. He became a familiar, tragic figure to the locals, the father who walks the woods. His relentless hope was a painful reminder of the town's collective failure. As years turned into a decade, and a decade bled into more, the hope began to curdle into a deep, hollow despair. The community's memory faded. New families moved to town, unaware of the story that haunted the older residents. The case was a ghost, a lingering question mark that hung over the town, a symbol of a promise unkept, and a family shattered by a mystery the forest refused to solve. 17 years is a long time to live with ghosts. By 2012, Robert Miles was a man hollowed out by grief. His wife, Sarah, had passed away a year prior, finally succumbing to a broken heart that had never truly healed after Jesse's disappearance. Now alone in the quiet, dusty house, Robert began the Herculean task of sorting through a lifetime of memories, deciding what to keep and what to let go. One rainy Saturday afternoon, he was in the attic, surrounded by cardboard boxes sagging with the weight of the past. He pulled one towards him, the words Jesse's school stuff scrawled on the side in his late wife's handwriting. He opened it, and the smell of old paper and memories filled the air. Inside were term papers, art projects, and a stack of her high school yearbooks. He picked up the one from 1995, her junior year. He sat down on an old trunk, the rain drumming a soft rhythm on the roof, and began to flip through the pages. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. He was just trying to feel close to her again. He saw her official school photo, that brilliant, confident smile frozen in time. He saw her with Liam in a candid shot at the fall formal. He lingered on each page, a painful wave of nostalgia washing over him. Then he turned to the section for clubs. His eyes scanned the group photos, the drama club, the debate team, the chess club. Then he saw it, the outdoor club. A group of students and 2 faculty advisors stood grinning in front of the school's entrance. And there, standing in the back row, was a younger, thinner Deputy Brody, who had been one of the club's advisors. Robert's heart gave a strange lurch. He had forgotten Brody was involved with the school. Standing right next to Brody in the photo was another man, someone Robert didn't recognize. He was lean, with dark, intense eyes, and a slight smirk. Robert squinted, leaning closer. The man was wearing a work jacket with a distinctive circular patch on the sleeve, the logo for the old Black Ridge Logging Company, which had gone bust shortly after Jesse vanished. A vague, unsettling memory flickered in Robert's mind. He frantically flipped through the yearbook to the section covering the town's annual Founders' Day picnic. He scanned the crowded photos and found him again. The same man, with the same intense eyes, was standing near a car in the background. It was a dark green sedan. A jolt, electric and powerful, shot through Robert. A dark green sedan. Liam had mentioned seeing a car like that on the access road. At the time, it had been dismissed as an insignificant detail. But now, seeing it here, connected to this man who was standing with Deputy Brody, it wasn't insignificant. It was everything. For 17 years, the truth had been sitting right here, bound in cardboard and ink, waiting. The case wasn't cold. It had been buried. Robert felt a surge of adrenaline he hadn't experienced in years. He drove straight to the state police barracks, bypassing the Pine Creek Sheriff's Office entirely. He clutched the 1995 yearbook like a holy text. He asked for the head of cold cases and was directed to Detective Isabella Rossi, a sharp, no-nonsense investigator in her late 30s with a reputation for seeing what others missed. Rossi listened patiently as Robert, his voice trembling with a mixture of grief and fierce urgency, laid the yearbook on her desk. He pointed to the photo of Deputy Brody and the unknown man. He explained the connection to the dark green sedan Liam had seen. Rossi was initially skeptical. A face in a 17-year-old yearbook was a long shot, a father's desperate grasp at straws. But there was something in Robert's conviction, a certainty that resonated with her investigator's intuition. To placate him, but also to be thorough, she agreed to look into it. She scanned the photo of the unidentified man into her system. Facial recognition technology, a tool that was science fiction in 1995, worked its magic. Within an hour, she had a name: Marcus Thorne. Thorne had been a logger with Black Ridge. His record showed a few minor offenses, but what caught Rossi's eye was a charge for theft from the logging company just before it went bankrupt. More importantly, he had been a close friend of then-deputy, now Sheriff Brody, and according to his records, he had abruptly left Oregon in early 1996, just a few months after Jesse disappeared. The coincidence was too great to ignore. Rossi's interest was now fully piqued. She drove to see Liam Carter, now a quiet, haunted man who ran the local hardware store. She didn't show him the photo at first. She just asked him again about that day. She asked about the dark green sedan. Liam's story was the same polished, tired narrative he'd been telling for years. Rossi stopped him. "Liam, I know you're hiding something. This isn't just about a car you passed. Tell me what really happened." She then placed the photo of Marcus Thorne on the counter. Liam stared at it, and his composure finally crumbled. The truth, dammed up for 17 years, came flooding out in a torrent of guilt and fear. They hadn't just seen the car. It had stopped them. Deputy Brody and Marcus Thorne got out. Brody had acted friendly, warning them about the fog and telling them to go home. But Thorne had stared at Jesse with a predatory intensity that had made Liam's skin crawl. Jesse, headstrong and annoyed by their condescending tone, had argued back. After the men left, she had insisted they continue up the trail, but take a less used side path to avoid running into them again. That was where she had vanished. Rossi now had a direct link. Brody, Thorne, and Jesse, all in the same place at the same time, and a 17-year lie to cover it up. She secured a warrant for Sheriff Brody's financial records from 1995. She found it, a single unexplained cash deposit of $10,000, made 1 week after Jesse Miles was officially declared missing. The pieces were locking into place, forming a picture of conspiracy and corruption. Rossi brought Marcus Thorne, now living under a new name in Idaho, in for questioning. Faced with Liam's new testimony and the financial records implicating Brody, Thorne's tough guy facade shattered. He confessed. He and Brody had been running an illegal deer and elk poaching ring in the national forest. On that day, Jesse Miles, in her quest for the perfect photo, had stumbled upon them with a freshly killed bull elk. She had lifted her camera and snapped a picture before they realized she was there. They confronted her. She panicked and ran. Thorne chased her. On a slippery, moss-covered ledge, she fought back. In the struggle, she lost her footing and fell, disappearing into a deep, narrow crevasse hidden by overgrown brush. Her death was an accident, born of panic, but the consequences of its discovery would not be. It would expose their lucrative criminal enterprise, destroy Brody's career, and send them both to prison for felony poaching and manslaughter. So Brody made a choice. He orchestrated a cover-up. He personally directed the search teams, deliberately keeping them away from the western ridge where the crevasse was located. He coached Liam on what to say. He created the narrative of a tragic accident, burying the truth just as surely as the forest had buried Jesse. The motive, when it was finally laid bare, was a grubby, pathetic tale of greed and cowardice. Sheriff Brody, the man sworn to protect the people of Pine Creek, and his accomplice, Marcus Thorne, had been poisoning the town for years. Their poaching operation was a lucrative side business, a way to supplement their incomes by plundering the very wilderness they pretended to revere. They sold the meat and prized antlers on a thriving black market, a network that stretched across 3 states. Jesse's photograph, that single, accidental click of a shutter, was a death sentence for their enterprise. It wasn't just the poaching, it was the web of lies and minor corruptions that would have unraveled with it. Brody's entire career, his reputation as a pillar of the community, would have been incinerated. And so, for the sake of his ambition and Thorne's illicit income, Jesse Miles had to remain a ghost. Following Thorne's detailed confession, a new kind of search team was assembled. This time, it wasn't volunteers in fluorescent vests. It was a team of forensic specialists and climbing experts from the state police. Thorne, in exchange for a plea deal, led them to the exact location. It was a treacherous spot on the western ridge, an area the original searchers had bypassed as impassable. Hidden beneath a thick canopy of rhododendron bushes was a narrow, deep fissure in the rock, a geological feature known as a crevasse, almost invisible from the main trail. A specialist was carefully lowered into the darkness. The air was cold, still, and dry. And then a voice crackled over the radio. "We've found her." They recovered skeletal remains, scraps of clothing consistent with what Jessie had been wearing, and something else, something miraculously preserved by the cold, dry conditions at the bottom of the fissure. It was her Minolta X700 camera. The camera was rushed to a forensics lab. Hopes were low that any images could be salvaged from the film after 17 years. But the expert technicians worked their magic. They carefully extracted the roll and began the delicate development process. The images that emerged were heartbreaking. The first few photos were stunning landscapes of the fog-shrouded trees, a testament to Jessie's talent. The final frame, however, was a chaotic, blurry mess. It was taken in a moment of pure terror. But it was clear enough. There, illuminated by the camera's flash, were the figures of a younger Deputy Brody and Marcus Thorne, standing over a massive dead elk. Jessie's last act on Earth had been to do what she did best: capture the truth. With the confession, the remains, and the final damning photograph, the conspiracy was blown wide open. Sheriff Brody was arrested in his office, the news sending shockwaves through the community that had trusted him for over 2 decades. The ghost of Jessie Miles had finally come home, and she had brought the truth with her. For Robert Miles, the revelation was a brutal, paradoxical storm of emotions. He stood on the edge of the police cordon, watching from a distance as a wrapped bundle was carefully hoisted out of the dark crevasse. 17 years of searching, of wondering, of hoping against hope, had come to this. It was an end to the not knowing, which was its own unique form of torture. But it was also the final, irreversible confirmation of her death. There was grief, profound and sharp, for the vibrant life she never got to live, for the photos she never got to take, for the woman she never got to become. Yet, woven through the pain was a thread of fierce, vindicating relief. His daughter had not been careless. She had not been a victim of the elements. She had been a victim of evil, and his gut feeling, the one that had gnawed at him for 6,205 days, had been right all along. Later, at the state police headquarters, Detective Rossi sat with him in a quiet room. She slid a series of glossy prints across the table. They were the photos from Jessie's camera. Robert picked them up with a trembling hand. He saw the world through his daughter's eyes one last time. The ethereal beauty of the fog, the intricate patterns of moss on a tree. Then he saw the last photo, the blurry, panicked image that had cost Jessie her life, but had ultimately solved her murder. He stared at it for a long time, not at the criminals, but at the composition. Even in her terror, her photographer's instincts had been perfect. Rossi then handed him the camera itself. It was scuffed and dented, but it was hers. He clutched the cold metal, an object that had been a part of her, her tool for seeing the world. He held it to his chest, and for the first time since Sarah died, he allowed himself to fully break. The tears were not just of sorrow, but of closure. The long, cold winter of uncertainty was finally over. He could bring Jessie home. He could bury her next to her mother. He could finally, truly, let her rest in peace. The case of Jessica Miles did not end with the convictions of Brody and Thorne. Its fallout rippled far beyond the borders of Pine Creek, becoming a landmark case in the study of police corruption and cold case investigation. The shocking revelation that a trusted sheriff had not only covered up a death, but had actively orchestrated a failed search for 17 years, exposed a terrifying vulnerability in the system. It served as a catalyst for change. Spurred by media attention and Robert Miles's quiet, dignified advocacy, the Oregon State Legislature took action. They passed a package of reforms colloquially known as Jessie's Law. This new legislation mandated the creation of a fully independent statewide cold case unit, specifically tasked with reviewing unsolved homicides and long-term missing persons cases, with a special focus on those where a potential conflict of interest with local law enforcement existed. It also implemented stricter protocols for how missing persons searches are conducted, requiring external oversight on any case that remains unsolved after 1 year. The legacy of Jessie Miles, therefore, became one of accountability. Her tragic death, born from a grubby secret, ultimately brought a greater truth to light. That power without oversight can be a dangerous poison. Her story became a permanent part of the training curriculum for law enforcement cadets across the state, a somber reminder of the devastating consequences of a single, corrupt choice. On a more personal level, her legacy lives on in the quiet strength of her father, a man who refused to let his daughter be a footnote in a dusty file. It is a testament to a father's unwavering love, a promise made in grief and kept through nearly 2 decades of darkness, proving that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, can sometimes be unearthed by nothing more than faith and a refusal to forget. The story of Jessie Miles is a harrowing chronicle of a life stolen by greed and a truth buried by betrayal. It stands as a chilling testament to a father's undying love and the horrifying reality that sometimes the greatest danger lies with those sworn to protect us. If this case resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more true crime mysteries that demand to be heard. The questions left in the wake of this tragedy are complex. Tell us in the comments, do you believe Liam Carter, who kept the secret of the confrontation with Brody and Thorne for 17 years out of fear, should have faced legal consequences for his silence?